The day.
Hey guys, it's Alec Torelli, and welcome to an episode of The Hand of the Day, brought to you at Live at the Bike in Los Angeles. I just finished playing a 25-50 high-stakes cash game session, and we were playing the 7-deuce game. So if you win a pot with 7-deuce, you win $100 from every other opponent. So this makes the gameplay a lot different. And some of the adjustments that you're going to have to make in a game like this are play a little bit tighter with 3-bets. Anytime you're 3-betting a hand or being aggressive pre-flop, even just an open raise, people automatically sort of suspect that you might have a hand like 7-deuce. So it's a little bit harder to get away with bluffs because people are a little bit more sticky at every point in the hand. So, but that being said, you do have a lot of incentive to play a hand like 7-deuce because winning the pot from any position in any situation automatically wins you $800, which in a 25-50 game is a decent amount. So all players have a lot of incentive to play this hand. So this hand, I get 7-deuce suited under the gun, and I'd opted to limp in. I could just raise and c-bet my way to victory, try and win the pot. I opted to limp, and I was going for potentially a limp re-raise. If everyone limped, of course I would just play the pot that way, but giving myself some options here, limping in under the gun. A guy 2 to my left limps in as well for 50 and folds around to Daniel, and he makes it 275. Pretty big raise, folded back to me, and he has about a 6K, 7K stack. And so I make it 1150 here. And my goal in this spot is just to get him to fold right away. I want to make a really big raise size that makes it difficult for him to call because he's committing a decent portion of his stack. And I wanted to put him in a spot where he sort of has to shove or fold and he can't really call easily. So making it something like 800 or 900 here would be a huge mistake because he has so much incentive to call in position, especially in lieu of the fact that 7-deuce is of course in my range of holdings. So I make it 1150, the other limper folds, and now he just calls. And this kind of threw me for a loop here. And at this point in the hand, I just figured there wasn't any hands that he had that were really weak. I didn't think that he would have something like 8-9 suited. I thought he might limp in with that originally, but then at the same time, I didn't think he'd call such a big re-raise with that. So at this point, I thought he had hands that he was trapping me with, and he sort of put me on 7-deuce. So I was already a little bit weary at this point in the hand and a little bit cautious that he was trapping me with something like aces or kings and hoping that I just bluffed it all away. So the flop comes down Jack 4-3, which is a really tempting flop for me to c-bet, right? Like, let's be honest, the pot's 2,300, and if I win, I get 800 more. So I'm getting a great price on my bluffs because I get more money than is in the pot. So this gives me a ton of incentive to bluff, right? But at the same time, I've never played with this guy before, but he seemed like, he's a young, looks like a wizard player, and so he knows all this stuff too. So I thought he was trapping me pre-flop just by the way he called when he called, and I just didn't think he was gonna give me any credit. Look, all the hands that he calls with pre-flop that are decent are not gonna fold on this flop. Any ace high is still gonna call, and any pair is still gonna call, and I didn't think there were that many hands that he could call with pre-flop that weren't ace high or pairs. Maybe something like king queen suited, but that still might peel the flop once and just sort of call in position and maybe float as well. So I just didn't think a c-bet was gonna win here hardly ever, and so I opted to check. He checks behind, and we go to the turn. A turn comes an 8, and at this point, I sort of feel like it's the same story. He still could be trapping me with big pairs, and even if he's not, he still isn't gonna fold ace high to a bet. At this point, after I check the flop, I'm repping even less hands on the turn because most of my really strong hands would have bet the flop. So at this point, even though the turn doesn't really help his hand at all, he can't really have an 8 in his hand, it still is really unlikely that it helps my hand as well. And it makes it even less likely that I have strong hands because I would have bet the flop with those. So because of this, I opt to check again, and I'm just sort of giving up in this spot, and he checks behind. Now the river is where things get really interesting, and that's where I make a big mistake in the hand. The river comes a 7, and at this point, it's pretty likely I have the best hand because, had he had a hand better than mine, like any pair, he probably would have bet the flop or the turn, or he would have shoved pre-flop. So I don't think he has a jack at this point. He probably would have bet at some point. Maybe he's like trapping with an overpair, just thinking I have nothing and the only way to win money is to trap me. That's definitely possible. He might have something like 2 10s that didn't want to bet the flop or the turn, 2 9s. That's possible as well. Maybe he has like Jack 10 suited. Those are possible hands, but it's pretty likely at this point that he has something like ace high. So at this point, I think I made 2 mistakes on the river, which is very impressive to do because you only really have 2 decisions. So I think I did both of them wrong, and I'm really happy to highlight when I make mistakes in poker because I think there's something to learn from it. I hope you guys can learn from it as well. So I think the first mistake I made on the river was checking. I think in this spot, it would have been really gangster to bet really, really small, something like 500. The pot's 2,500. I'm getting an 800 overlay if I win. And betting 500 puts him in a really, really tough spot. It sort of allows me to bluff if I'm ever bluffing, and it sort of forces him to call with ace high as well. And I might actually get value from my hand if he has something like ace king. He might actually call because he's getting an excellent price. It also sort of takes away his bluff, and it prevents him from putting me in a really tough spot. Because there's a chance that I'm going to check call a bet here with 7 deuce because I'm getting such a good price, it might be better just to bet myself and get value, but bet smaller than the amount that he would have bet so I don't put myself in a really tough spot. And I also sort of prevent him from raising me. It's really, really unlikely that if I bet 500 or 600, he's gonna raise me because his line doesn't really make any sense. There's not many hands that he can justify a raise with. So I think betting 500 or 600 here would have been a really good blocking bet. It would have been a really good spot to do it. And I actually might have got paid off by a worse hand. And so anyway, I ended up checking, which it's arguably a mistake. It could be fine as well. But now he bets 1450. And here's where I think I made a definitive mistake, but arguably my second mistake. But I think here's where I made a definitive mistake in the hand. So the pot's 2,500. I'm getting 800 more if I win the pot. So I'm getting a little over 2 to 1 in the hand, even though his bet is not giving me 2 to 1 because I have more incentive to call based on the fact that I win $800 because I have 7 deuce. So if I win the hand with 7 deuce, I get 800 more than if I didn't. So in this spot, I'm getting over almost 3 to 1. So I only need to be right about 25% of the time. So that's automatically giving me a good price to call. He also has a ton of incentive to bluff because if he thinks I have 7 deuce, he doesn't want me to check and win it at showdown on the river because then he loses an even bigger pot. So he has a lot of incentive to bluff here. He could rep a lot of strong hands, and at the same time, my range looks very, very weak. So when you add up the component of the 7 deuce, and then you add up like how both of our hands look to each of us as respective opponents, like 7 deuce is honestly one of the best hands I could have in this spot. Most of the time that I limp re-raise or anyone limp re-raises and then they check all 3 streets, the best hand they have is something like ace high. So when I have one of the best hands I could have here, I should definitely be calling. And when you add that up with the fact that I'm getting an 800 overlay, I think this is a pretty simple call from my point of view. Also because my opponent has a lot of incentive to bluff if he ever is turning a hand like ace high into a bluff. So I think this is pretty clear cut. I think I made a definitive mistake, and I think a lot of things in poker are black and white, and I'm happy to point out when I'm wrong because I'm definitely human, I'm definitely wrong. Why did I fold then? I don't know. I just felt like I just went back to my pre-flop read and I was like, I didn't feel like he was capable of calling me light pre-flop that often. And I also didn't know I didn't think he could have something like ace 10 offsuit, which is what he had. If I knew his range was that wide, like ace 10 offsuit, I would have absolutely snap called, been super happy about it. I just thought that he couldn't have ace 10. He didn't have ace jack because he would have bet the flop or the turn. And if he had ace king or ace queen, he probably would have checked the river and hoped to win at showdown. So I was thinking that he must have had a pair and he would have bet any pair on this river that was better than mine. It might have been faulty logic. I guess hindsight is 20/20. It's easier to sort of analyze this after the hand, but I still think I should have called the river. Credit to Daniel for outplaying me in this hand. Well done, buddy. If you're watching, thumbs up, dude. You got me. So anyway, I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you like the 7 deuce hand, and it definitely adds a fun dynamic to the game. And I get a lot of questions. I got a lot of questions about this hand in particular, but also how to play 7 deuce hands in general. So I think going back to like just simple strategy with 7 deuce, you could do different things, right? Limping is one option, limp raising is an option, or just raising and betting your way to victory. But you definitely got to play it when you have such a huge overlay, which is why it adds so much fun to the game. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. It helps me grow the channel and produce more awesome content for you guys as well. So thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys next time from Live at the Bike. Take it easy. Cheers.